The next call is a split call. Catherine Delahunty, 5 minutes.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker, tēnā koutou te wharenui o te pō. I'd like to make a short call on this and acknowledge the other speakers. I think there's been some really interesting contributions, and the last speaker asked what flaws there could possibly be in the bill. And I think one of the issues is the fact that this is relatively new technology, and although we're supporting it to Select Committee and looking forward to it as being a constructive, enabling tool for a better justice system, there is evidence from other jurisdictions and the use of technologies of these things not always being followed through and having problems with surveillance. So I think it's not good to become romantic about technology and think simply because we put the system in place it will automatically work the way it's intended. So I think those are the kinds of issues that will probably come up during this debate. I've also been thinking as the human rights spokesperson a lot about the human rights aspects of the bill, and that's the human rights of everybody, the human rights of victims who are often terrified by the return to the community of people who've caused them serious harm. And so if there is a flexible but firm boundary around that person, which means they cannot return to stalk their victims, then that is a very good thing, and that is something that we would support. And we recognise that anything, particularly for women in the community who are feeling unsafe, anything that makes it safer in that way is a good thing. But the human rights issues, as highlighted by the Section 7 Boer report, do have to be taken seriously, and we will be, as my colleague David Clinton said, looking at those at the Select Committee, because we can never lightly set aside any concerns around human rights. And in fact, last year at a World Congress on probation that was held in Europe, a number of issues were raised, and I'd just like to quote from some of their findings, which was, over the years, many understandable fears have been expressed by European probation services and civil libertarians more generally in relation to the surveillance implications of tagging and tracking technologies. European experience to date has shown that electronic monitoring can indeed be a useful form of offender supervision within a framework in which other programs may also be applied. The key question is how will it remain in the future? And so it's really important that there must be a debate about best practice and an understanding of what must be done to ensure that worst does not come to worst, as it so easily could with this technology. So that's quoting from the findings of the World Congress on Probation last year, because the issues of human rights and civil liberties are not simple, and technology doesn't solve them automatically. Technology is not, as my colleague and others have said, the solution to reoffending recidivism and risk to the community, or indeed to the person themselves who has come out of prison. It's actually really important that we invest in not only rehabilitation within the prison system for everyone, but also that we rehabilitate our society and its attitudes towards crime and attitude towards people who've committed offences. So that, and I'm thinking here of the late Celia Lashley and her extraordinary work in this regard, and I'm thinking also of Kim Workman, people who've actually dedicated their lives to thinking about how do we make things safer for all of us. And it never really works when there are severe restrictions on human rights to the point at which the person becomes dedicated to overcoming the rules and opportunity to further offend. It's much more effective when there's buy-in. And what's clear about the electronic monitoring is, there does have to be a level of buy-in because people have to charge up the electronic monitors. So monitoring is important, and technology should be a service of justice. But we also need to keep thinking about the Bora, thinking about what it is that we mean by human rights, and making sure that actually this is enabling and it makes people feel that they have a reason to stick within those boundaries rather than to try and circumvent them. So we'll be looking at this very carefully and making sure that there are no unintended consequences. Because one of the things about the surveillance state, which we are now developing in this country for many other people, not just criminals, and I myself have been a victim of the surveillance state and know just how random, inefficient, badly managed and sometimes prejudicial the surveillance state is towards people who dissent. We want to make sure that it is applied in the right place to the right people in the right way so it betters everybody. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.